Thank you, ma'am. A very good morning to one and all present here. My colleagues have very beautifully explained the different psychological and medical comorbidities which we have to face while evaluating a child for specific learning disorders. I would like to throw some light upon the important and crucial role of language and its assessment in evaluating for specific learning disorders. Firstly, let me briefly take you through the typical language milestones that we observe in a typically developing child. So, meaningful verbal communication begins at about 6 to 8 months with babbling of a combination of consonant vowels, and meaningful single word utterances are attained by 1 year of age. And predominantly at this age, the vocabulary consists of nouns, and the child moves on to 2-word utterances by 2 years of age, where the child attempts to combine nouns and verbs to produce functional communication. By 3 years of age, the child starts producing short 3 to 4 word sentences and attempts to mimic or imitate the adult productions. And by 5 years, the child has mastered the basic grammatical forms and is able to speak coherently in 4 to 5 word utterances. And the child now attempts to master complex grammatical forms. We all know that the components involved in language and literacy are overlapping and interdependent on each other, and it is proved in literature that delayed language development does impact academic performance at later stages during schooling. Therefore, a comprehensive spoken language assessment in addition to a written language assessment is very crucial for a differential diagnosis or for identifying the presence of any kind of a language delay or a concern while evaluating for specific learning disorders. Here are a few red flag indicators that can be used by any professional during the interaction with the child for a referral to a speech language pathologist for a detailed evaluation. A few of the prominent red flag indicators that we commonly come across is an abnormally high or a loud voice, the child having trouble conveying ideas and understanding of instructions, production of sounds incorrectly, like substituting ver for l and r, or lisping, or substitution of any other sounds for the target sound. The child might also have a trouble mastering the normal flow of language, which may result in interruption to the flow of speech, which we commonly term as stuttering or stammering. So these are a few prominent indicators that must be looked for during any kind of an interaction or during the assessment for a child, and these must be referred to a speech language pathologist for a further detailed evaluation. Coming to the language assessment, the language assessment for spoken language is tested based on 2 broad areas of reception and expression, and these explore the core components of language of phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatic abilities. Under the receptive domain, we assess for the processing of sound and sound combinations, understanding of concepts, sequencing of thoughts, and linking of thoughts in an appropriate manner. Under the expressive language, vocabulary of the child is assessed, pronunciation and the expressive abilities, grammatical forms and its usage in an appropriate manner, narrative and discourse skills, and conversational skills, and the ability to maintain a to and fro conversation is also assessed. At this stage, it is very important to account for the various cultural and linguistic diversities, especially in a country like India, where bilingualism and multilingualism is very prevalent. And under this component, I would like to mention English language learners, which was already dealt with in the previous presentations by my colleagues. So this is a very important factor to be considered, and language must be tested across all languages that the child is exposed to, so that any discrepancy between the performances of the child across languages can be picked up, and it will help us form a more holistic picture about the child's performance. There are various tools for language testing, although there is a limited dearth for Indian tools. The most commonly Western tools that we use for estimating the language performances of the child is the preschool language scale and the receptive expressive emergent language scale. We do have a few Indian tools which are culturally and linguistically relevant to our population, like the linguistic profile test, which is available in 7 different languages of India, the assessment of language development, which is available in English but has culturally and appropriately linguistic relevant stimuli for us, and also the dyslexia assessment in languages of India. Apart from carrying out standardized tools, it is very important for a qualitative assessment in terms of rapport building and assessing of conversational skills. Again, it plays a very important role in our setting, both because we do not have standardized tools to assess all languages, and hence qualitative assessment has a very significant role. Moving on to the interpretation of language assessment. Based on the standardized and the non-standardized tests in formal and informal settings, we determine the receptive and expressive language ages, the RLA and the ELA of the child, which is then compared to the chronological age of the child, and we determine whether there is a lag present between the language ages and the chronological ages. Any lag greater than 6 to 8 months between the chronological and the language ages of the child may indicate a possible language delay. Now, this lag may be present in both the receptive and expressive domains, which indicates a mixed receptive and expressive language disorder, or it may be present only in the expressive abilities, in the expressive domains of the child, which indicates an expressive language disorder. Here again, I emphasize on testing of language performances across all languages exposed to the child, where sometimes we find a discrepancy in the language ages between the instructional language and the native languages and the other languages, the L2 and the L3 of the child, which may indicate a poor language proficiency. I would now like to just illustrate upon a pre-pilot study, which is an ongoing project at our center. Here we aim to compare the language profiles in children with specific learning disorder and language disorders, where we have chosen children between 8 to 13 years with English as their instructional language and Hindi or Marathi as their native language. We group these children into 3 different groups. Group 1 consisting of children with only specific learning disorder, Group 2 with specific learning disorder along with an associated poor English language proficiency, Group 3 with children diagnosed to have a specific learning disorder along with an associated language disorder. So the DALI and the LPT profiles of these children were aimed to be compared, and the initial results suggest that although there is a discrepancy, or there is a marked difference seen between the profiles of these children, at times the severe cases of learning disorders mask the presence of a language concern, which may pose as a problem later on during the intervention stages. And especially with the shift of paradigm from focus to merely diagnosis, and the shift has changed and now the focus has moved on to intervention, it is very important to pick up these sensitive and subtle language concerns which may be present in the child and address them and tap them during the intervention planning. In summary, I would like to conclude by saying language assessment is a very important component in the diagnosis, and there should be a comprehensive spoken language assessment in both the receptive and expressive domains, in addition to the written language and the psychoeducational testing, to rule out any presence of a possible language delay. And in this process, it is very important to account for the English language learners and the various dialectal variations which are present in our languages. Certain children with language concerns may mimic features of SLD, and hence language concerns may be disregarded or missed out, and hence a language assessment is crucial to pick up these differences and discrepancies and be addressed during the planning of intervention. Thank you.
So essentially, with what we found really is that there has been a comorbid mixed expressive language disorders in children which were referred to us for a learning for a learning disorder. And that has been like a really eye-opener to us because as Nitya remarked, that intervention. So these children are undergoing remediation but they're still not doing well. And the reason is that along with remediation in SLP is extremely important to target on their language disorder per se along with the remediation. And also in children with poor English language proficiency, along with remediation to improve the language stimulation is very critical. So Nitya's presentation and the pre-pilot which she's doing right now has been a real eye-opener for us and it's helping us to understand the disorder much better. So with this we end our session for today. And if there are any question answers, we'll be happy to take. So at this point, I would invite all the speakers to please come on the podium. Come, Mansi.
Check. Check.
For the mic because I've been dying to ask questions and before somebody else jumped in I thought let's grab the opportunity.
No, I think like yesterday you are the beginner for the questions, otherwise as Kate remarked, as Samir remarked yesterday that there will be 5 rupees fine if no questions asked and today is day 2 so it's 10 rupees. So Nandini, please go ahead.
So thank you for very comprehensive session. I really enjoyed it and I'm very happy that Kate and her team put this together. So coming back to a couple of questions which are often asked to many of us who work with SLP. What in terms of as clinicians do you advise or advocate is a good age to diagnose SLP? It's something that follows me every time I do rally presentations. And you have screenings for 5 and 6-year-olds. Should you give a diagnosis at 5 and 6? And we've all been discussing the importance of early interventions. So if any or all of you would comment on it. I have a ton of them. I'll quickly sort of run them through so that you can answer some and then we can probably look into more people. So I got the impression that you are advocating assessments or evaluations in both the instructional language and the native language. So as a team, can we begin to make this somewhere? I think this is an important factor that needs to go into policy. Okay, so I think since we are having a discussion on policy tomorrow, this I think is an important point that should be tabled and sort of be written down. It's very rare to find too many child psychiatrists who are familiar with SLP. So I've never really looked at the psychiatric curriculum in India. The people who've been trained outside often come in with that understanding, but I find a huge lack of understanding among psychiatrists themselves on the differences between SLD, autism, specific language impairment, and the role that a medical professional plays. Now that we have the additional gamut also of a developmental pediatrician and a pediatric neurologist who have come into this process as a medical fraternity, I know Dr. Dalvi talked about it yesterday. Is there something that you propose to do on a medical level whereby there can be some common understanding of what SLD or learning disorder should be across these 3 communities? They don't necessarily agree. Unfortunately, they don't necessarily talk to each other too. So that would help a lot because I find parents say we went to a pediatric neurologist and he or she said this, and they went to a psychiatrist and they said something else. So I think something coming in there from your end would make a big difference. And had a lot of discussion on IQ. So I want to get a little more clarity on the fact that though you did make a point, and I think you did a great job of detailing out DSM-5, there is a reference to the fact that an IQ of 70 is mandatory, okay? Which means there is a reference to IQ. Okay? So does one still lead to the understanding that IQ is no longer important and ensuring an IQ of 70 is crucial? How important is that to DSM-5? So, and of course, that opens up another can of worms, which is the best IQ test to use. Given that we're looking at children who might have language problems, is it better to use a performance-based test like a CPM or a Ravens or something which is less reliant on language? What are your thoughts on that? And finally, a provocative comment, which I hope we will get a chance to debate on a little bit, because this is an idea that we are developing. So I saw across all your presentations, you focus a lot on cognitive skills. And I'm afraid we cannot ignore the importance of technology in our lives. And you will see kids even with as young as 4 years of age who might come from low-income backgrounds but were very familiar playing with phones. And technology is getting across to those lives too. As a team, what are your thoughts on taking some tests which are looking at cognitive processing and putting them into a performance-based or a game-based scenario which a child is able to play with, and the back-end documents the performance of the child as he or she is doing it. And that level of testing which is collected back-end is something that then comes to you for more detailed evaluation, etc. So it's sort of a two-stage process that happens. And what are your thoughts on that? Does it take away, and or do you think it would be a supplement? Would it give a child a less anxious scenario to bring out his or her abilities? Some comments on that.
So, Nandini, a whole lot of questions. I hope I get them. In case if I missed a few, please tell them back. Yeah. So, I agree that at the medical level, as medical professionals, psychiatrists definitely, I feel, are more aware about SLD and test rather than pediatricians. We have our standard textbook of Nelson just has one chapter on speech language, on specific learning disability. Also, as pediatricians, we are more focused for diseases, and we are trained in the clinical mind that that if there is malaria, the gold standard is an anti-malarial test or a peripheral smear for malarial parasites. To move away from the shift of saying that every disease should have a gold standard, there is a test for that, and that's when treatment begins. It's a little difficult as pediatricians from our years of training to move away from that to mental health diseases forum, in the sense that there is gray areas and not black and white. So that's the role. That's how developmental pediatricians have come into the foray, and more often because you see parents are more comfortable with pediatricians because they've seen the pediatricians right since the child's birth. Also, they are more open to them. So what we are trying to do is, in regards to that, about 3-4 years back, we felt that the need that whatever we are doing at the center has to be conveyed to the pediatricians at large. That is when we started with a fellowship program, which is a year-long fellowship program with the MUHS University, that is Maharashtra University, and it is one of this first fellowship program in learning disability and developmental pediatrics for the whole country. It is only just recently, about 2 years back, there are other fellowship programs all over the state where the centers are, which are run by developmental pediatricians, have started. That is under the aegis of a group organization like IIP, which Sunny represented yesterday. So we've had our first fellow passed out about 4 years back. They are in various parts of the state. One is in Karnataka, one is in Nagpur, the other one is Nashik, etc. And they're doing pretty well, and that's how, in their small way, they're trying to create awareness among professionals, medical professionals, as well as teachers, as well as parents. What we've also started recently doing at SIAN is, surprisingly, the MBBS students have got interested into this, So when they have about, just digressing from the topic, and since this question was brought out, they have about like 3 months rotation in pediatrics, which is mandatory for their MBBS curriculum. When they're posted in pediatrics, especially in my unit, we have a posting in the OPD. They come to the LD OPD, which runs on Wednesday and Saturdays. They're also interested in coming to the center and observing things. They collaborate with us for small projects and research-based stuff. Interestingly, so that's another way, and they go back and they talk about it to friends. They have an annual conference which is there of medical students. We've been approached a couple of times to have a center presentation or some cases kind of a thing among students, MBBS students, which come from all over the state. So that is a small way, and we hope that, and right now in pediatrics, developmental pediatrics is a big thing. It's an emerging field by itself. There are now questions asked in the exams, and so we hope that students are motivated to read about the chapter in nursing, which is usually ignored. So that's that. Again, with the IIT, hopefully we'll be able to reach out to more wider foray for pediatricians with the modules which are now coming out. So that's that. The other question was, sorry. Yeah. So age, well, there is I remember reading somewhere that 2 years of formal instruction is required for a diagnosis, and now we should definitely move away from the diagnosis to more of intervention. So if we have the risk factors of language delay, speech issues being there, or say family history of dyslexia, and then you have the early screening test where rhyming is a problem, etc. When you pick up those indicators, the child has to be intervened first before diagnosis. I think diagnosis should be, the last thing that happens, instead of the focus being on diagnosis and provisions and let the kid kind of rumble through the entire lifespan. We've had children coming as young as 5 years, 6 years to us with a concern and brought by a concerned parent or referred by an alert school teacher. And they come with that typical, writing errors being saved, identification being a problem, etc. There is a good tool called as DeBells, which is there on the website, and it's free for all, and it gives a very good indicator as to what subdomains the kid is affected in and helps in remediation too. And we found that to be good. When we are using DALI in these such small children, we just say at risk and advise for intervention and hope that they come back and hope that they grow out of the process, hopefully. What was your third question?
Just contribute in relation to what ma'am just shared. I think the first 8 years, the child is in the developmental phase. Although we say that the first 3 years are the early developmental, the formative years, but till the 8 years of age, their cognitive processes, their learning systems are actually developing, and that's why although we may assess these children, but till the age of 8, we actually wait till we do like a formal testing and do a diagnosis. And it's very clearly mentioned in research that till the age of 8 years, your learning processes are very dynamic.
But is there consensus in the community? My worry is that we have a small bunch of informed people out there. So the parents end up going there, the schools end up going there, we get that. But in a number of other cases, this is not there. So again, as part of a medical fraternity, because I think somewhere, and I hope we discuss this tomorrow, we are able to come to consensus on one is you have to clearly establish that there has to be a group of people. It is not a solitary individual who should be doing that. That I think is something that as policy you must mandate, that you must have X, Y, and Z, lay them out. And how is it possible that you say that up till the age of 8, it must be risk? After that, should you begin with? Because now with the policy coming in, and that's where I'm worried, because the CWD Act, now the government will get into action where they will start giving out certification. And then the whole mad rush will begin to forge certificates to make sure that that certification is coming. And in a country like India, we need to walk into this with our eyes open and not say we should have thought of it. So now that we know all of that, if at least as far as possible we can plug in some of the holes in the beginning, there are others which will come up, which we'll deal with. But and this I think has to come from the medical fraternity. It cannot come from the research, because the developmental aspect, when a pediatrician is saying that or a medical doctor is saying that, that's a completely different value as opposed to an educator saying that. So that would be helpful.
Years common instruction in 8 years is so I really I've been I think the role of testing in instructional and native language, I mean there is absolutely no debate about that any longer, and we must put that as a policy decision definitely. Tools, LPT, though linguistic profile test, would Nitya speak about that? Ages, etc.
So we have the linguistic profile test in 7 different languages in India, which is a good thing, but it helps us assess the syntactic and the semantic components of language. And we have the test for the early ages, which is again good because it helps us get a holistic picture of the language contribution to the entire process of evaluating for learning. And but again, the language has different components, and LPT predominantly looks at more of syntactic and semantic components. Whereas in literacy and language, there is a lot of overlap even in the phonological and the morphological components, which is again not tested so much in these tests. So this poses as a limitation in terms of testing, in terms of a testing bias which is present.
I very strongly feel that our SLP organization, which is there, should also be really on board for the policy decisions, for guidelines for SLP. It's, I think, high time. The LPT unfortunately is not available in English. If it was, it would have been really good because we would know what is the English kind of a linguistic profile in our country. The LPT is available and it's been tested across rural, etc., all areas, so it's a good test. But I really strongly feel if we have some mediators with the SLP division, SLP group, all India group, they should definitely be part of the policy making. So unfortunately, Masrat is we've crossed our time, and if we have any questions, I will be happy to take in the Q&A.
Thank you, Dr. Mona and team, and Dr. Mansi from NIAS, and a token of appreciation to all of you. Thank you. And we have 2 more sessions on assessment and dyslexia, so we can, take on more questions. So keep questions for the other 2 sessions too.
A very quick announcement before we break for tea. There is a new book which will be coming out, which I think will be of interest to many of you. Maths and Learning Disabilities and Dyscalculia by Dr. Steve Chin. Dr. Chin was here 2 years ago. I think he's been here a couple of times. He's done a lot of workshops for us on mathematics. He's a very significant figure in the special education and especially of maths. And many of you will have attended his workshops or heard of him. He has also spoken at Chennai and other places in India. This book is a book which he has, which is very much in demand, I think, elsewhere. And Unique Ability Consulting has very kindly worked on bringing it to India. It will be available from November because it's in the last stages of publication, and at a price of 3,000 rupees. That's a special price for India. But at the conference, it is available to people who would like to book a copy in advance. There will be a 30% discount offered by Unique Ability Consulting. So if you wish to order a book, please hand in your names at the desk with your details, whatever details they ask for, and contact details. And UAC will get in touch with you when the book is ready. Is that right? Okay.
We have overshot our session by 20 minutes, so I request all of you to have quick tea and coffee and try to be back in 15 minutes, which again is beyond our time, but 15 minutes, please be back.